Hello, it is basically the end of the year. If I work my ass off and get this video out before the end of the year, yeah. Happy 2024. Welcome in 2025. And today, this will probably be like a 2-hour video. And it is my tier list. I did one 9 or 10 months ago, and they've released 3 new killers. Bunch of killers got ginormous changes, some smaller ranking up, some ranking down, some a lot. Skull Merchant, we're not going to talk about it. And today I really wasn't sure how to start this video. I've sat here for a couple hours just brainstorming, because I feel like people aren't really going to listen to what I have to say, and if you're a part of that, I totally understand. Nobody wants to sit through a 2-hour long video. So if you're looking for a completely lethal based tier list, something that uses like Ans's similar rating system of like, just you're a basic ass bitch and you put Nurse and Blight in S tier, and then you throw like Unknown in top 4, I get it. You know what? Here you go. Here's a lethal tier list. Pause if you need to. But that's not what we're doing here today. Today, I have mathematically decided what is the greatest killer in Dead by Daylight. Similar to football, you have Tom Brady, who is the greatest, right? And then you have Aaron Rodgers, who is probably mechanically the best quarterback to ever play. This year doesn't really count, all right? We're not going to talk about his stint on the Jets. Woody Johnson is an awful owner. I hope he gets fired. Gets kicked out by the league. Roger Goodell does something. He sucks ass. His kids have more of a voice than him. Side tangent. But today, like I said, I mathematically figured out what is the greatest killer in DBD, and I might be biased, but of course, Wesker is number 1. You can't really go wrong with that. But it will have 7 different categories of how I rank these killers. Starting off, we have snowball potential, which is weighted as the highest one. It really just how fast can a killer win games. When you think of who has the highest snowball potential, you're thinking Twins, Pyramid Head, maybe Nurse. I would say Twins and Pyramid Head. Twins, you get everybody injured. Victor is practically impossible to stop when you get the ball rolling. And so there's really not much you can do. And Pyramid Head, with his ability to tunnel somebody out and get a 3v1 at 4 or 5 gens, is just unmatched. You can't really find that with any other killer besides like Nurse. Like I said, the ability to just instantly have a 3v1 if you want to is insane. Like, the snowball potential there, unparalleled. And when you think of the worst snowball potential, you think of a power that doesn't really work, that doesn't really get injures, that doesn't even down people, and you think of Skull Merchant. This is going to be a reoccurring theme. If you haven't caught on yet, Skull Merchant, probably going to be the worst in every single category. For the second highest weighted category, we have map reliability. Ultimately, map reliability is about how often a killer can get a 4K depending on which map, whether it be the strongest for killers or the weakest for killers. You think of Blight and Pig. Unironically, Pig. You spawn into RPD as Pig, you should not lose that game. I'm sorry. You should not lose that game. You spawn into Eerie of Crows as Blight, you probably should not lose that game. Granted, Eerie of Crows sucks ass. But then you think of like the highest map reliability, and you think of like Trapper. Like, man, you need the perfect map to play Trapper. Otherwise, people are just going to see him. You know, you think of the brand new map, Ormond Lake Mine, and it's just snow everywhere. You can't hide a single trap. Maybe in main building, but people are going to see him from a mile away. And so the third category I have is skill ceiling. How much does your skill dictate your ability to get 4 kills? And so you really think of like Wesker, Unknown, Billy, Blight. These killers that, depending on how good you are, can really dictate the match. And then you think of like Knight and Myers. These killers, your skill really doesn't input anything. And so, can you actually make the difference between winning and losing? And so, for the fourth category, I have add-on strength. Really, how much do add-ons affect a killer's ability to get 4 kills? You think of Pinhead. I mean, Engineer's Fang is... I see Engineer's Fang pretty much every single game that I get at Pinhead, but he also has Original Pain and Impaling Wire, which are probably 2 of the strongest add-ons in the game. And then you also have like his 2 box solving add-ons that I never take off. It's just not even box solving, but interrupting box juggling. And so really, how much can add-ons affect your gameplay? You know, back before Myers got his rework, Tombstone Piece was practically strong, and just like with Pyramid Head, you could get a 3v1 at 4 gens. Now, that being said, Myers is considerably worse than Pyramid Head, but how much does an add-on affect your ability to get 4 kills? For the 5th highest weighted category, I have the skill floor. How easy is it to pick up a killer and instantly get 4 kills? When I think of the easiest killers to pick up and completely understand, I think of Wesker. I think of Legion. Honestly, I think of Knight. I think Knight is just one of those killers that if you don't get this, should you be playing DBD? I don't know. And then you think of the highest skill floor, and that's really Singularity. Like, there's nothing close to Singularity. It's hard to like teach someone how to play Singularity unless you're watching like Coco. And next we have add-on versatility. How restricted are you in playstyles? When I think of the most add-on versatility in Dead by Daylight, I'm thinking of Plague. I'm thinking of Pinhead. Hell, even like Huntress maybe. And when I think of the lowest, fuck dude, Unknown. Pyramid Head has to be there. Like, Unknown, you have to run Blurry Photo. Even after they butchered the shit out of that add-on, you still have to run Blurry Photo. Pyramid Head, I never take off range add-ons, because like the Sloppy Butcher add-on, not really worth it. And so for the last category, I have perk variability. How much do perks affect a killer's ability to get 4 kills? AKA, if a killer has built-in slowdown. If a killer is just that good at chasing that they can't afford to run 4 slowdown perks. How many perk builds can you run and get away with getting 4 kills? When I think of the best perk variability in the game, I have to go with my boy Wesker. I don't remember the last time I actually ran slowdown when I was like just fucking around. I don't really need it, to be honest. And this is all in my opinion. This is a completely subjective tier list. This is not objective. If you really want it, you already watched past it, so I don't know why you're still here. So for each category, it will be rated in a basically 1 through 7 system, the 7 being a very rare and extraordinary feat, but from a very low, average, high, very high, highest, and best in only some circumstances, like I said. And ultimately, starting off with the S tier, we have Wesker. I think he is by far the greatest killer in Dead by Daylight. I put him at a very high snowball potential, average map reliability, the best skill ceiling, highest add-on strength, lowest skill floor, average add-on versatility, and best perk variability. So that is 2 7s. Ultimately, I don't think he's the most lethal, as you can see in my other tier list. But I do think if you are just looking for overall the greatest killer in Dead by Daylight, he is by far. The amount of time and effort you can put into learning this killer, and I'm still learning new things to this day, is insane. He has such a high skill floor for such a simple design of a killer. And ultimately, his build variability is insane. You know, I have my regular build, which is just egg gloves and then a bunch of chase perks. You can run Jewel Beetle and Line Medallion with a throw build. You can run lab photo and a bunch of pallet break perks. Like the combinations are just endless. And so I think what really hurts him is that he is pretty map reliable. Like, he has a pretty high map reliability. You get something like Area Crows, where every loop is just a block, or it leads back into Shack. He can't really do anything. You have a map like Pale Rose, where every tree you just slide off of, and you can't really bounce anywhere. You can't, there's nothing to hug tech. Every loop is just round as shit. I think he kind of, a lot of the maps that make Billy amazing is what Wesker struggles on. And that's funny because they're my two favorite killers, where it's completely different playstyles between maps. The built-in slowdown that Wesker is afforded is ultimately what puts him so high, I think. And not just in like my own tier list, but any tier list really. And he never got really a major nerf back in June, but it was enough of a nerf to stop the hard tunneling off of Hook on infected survivors, while also remaining his power as a threat. And I have to say that it is quite impressive what Behavior did with his power, making it balanced for survivors and also making it a threat for the killer. Truly, my heart goes out to whatever Behavior employee made that decision. For the second killer in the S tier, none other than Blight. If you are looking for the most brain-dead fun killer in the game, look no further. The skill ceiling, like Wesker, is just, I'm still learning new things about Blight to this day. I'm sure Momo 7th is still learning stuff. I'm sure Lilith Omen is still learning stuff. Ultimately, I think what really makes him amazing is that he doesn't really have a bad map. Every killer will struggle on Area of Crows, but I think Blight, with his improved bump collision, just does not care about pallets on that map. It's really crazy because they continue to touch up his add-ons, and they're still so strong, which is why I have him at a highest add-on strength. I think his snowball potential is very high. I wouldn't say highest necessarily, because it is, you still have quite a bit of counterplay to Blight. You just have to know what you're doing, and you have to be in a good position to counter him. Like I said, he has the lowest map reliability. I think you can play him well and proficient on any map that you want, as long as you know what you're doing. As I said before, he has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game. Learning how to 180 flick or J flick is just, it is so satisfying and so rewarding. I will say that he has a fairly high skill floor. Learning how to flick with his lethal rush is fairly difficult. Learning bump collision, fairly difficult. Learning timings and everything is fairly difficult. But ultimately, what puts him pretty high is that he has such a high add-on versatility. I don't think he has more than like 3 add-ons that are somewhat mid. Not even bad, just somewhat mid. He has a troll add-on, and then like there's some add-ons that could get a buff. And that's about it. You can use pretty much everything. Like, you might only see double speed, but did you know that Alchemist Ring gives you like 200% longer rushes over the time span of an entire 5 rush? Hell, you can do Adrenaline Vial and Alchemist Ring and have like 40 seconds of just straight rushing. It's insane. And to wrap this up, I think he has a incredibly high perk variability. You can run pretty much whatever you want on this killer, as he is one of the best killers in the game. But what really sets him apart with perk variability is that, you know, if a killer can get value out of Disillusion, I think they can run any perk in the game. The third greatest killer, I have Pinhead, surprisingly. I know. I do think he has one of the highest snowball potentials in the game. Getting a box just opens up the floodgates of, you're gonna fuck people up. Like, there's no stopping Pinhead when he has a box up and somebody on the hook or somebody slugged. You can't do much unless you're in a coordinated team. What I do think he lacks in is his map reliability. Getting something like Pale Rose, getting something like RPD, maps where there are just so many obstacles in the way that can stop you from interrupting box or straight up just stop you from hitting a chain mid-chase is really what puts his map reliability so high. Learning box logic and where it will spawn is such a high skill ceiling that he is one of the hardest killers in the game to learn. And yet he is still, all of that skill that you put into this killer is incredibly rewarding. Like I said earlier, I do think he has the best add-on strength in the game. Nothing even comes close. Impaling Wire and Original Pain is the best add-on combination in the game. Maybe Plague with her Deadlock Corrupt, and then maybe a Duration add-on thrown in. But Pinhead has the best add-ons by far. Not only does he have the best add-on strengths, but he has a very high add-on versatility. You can run pretty much everything. And last but not least, he has a very high perk variability. I think, like I said with Disillusion, any killer that can get value out of Rapid Brutality can run pretty much any perk in the game. Hell, Face of Darkness without Thrill of the Hunt is one of his best perks. He can utilize lethal like no other killer can. You can get a box in 20 seconds of the game starting with one perk. His snowball potential starts pretty much at the start of the game, and that is just unparalleled. And I think for the fourth greatest killer in Dead by Daylight, we have Billy. My other baby, my sweet Billy. I think he has a very high snowball potential. I'm not going to give it a 6 just because I think he's still, just like Blight, he still has his downsides. He's not perfect by any means. He has a fairly low map reliability, where I think killers like Wesker struggle, Billy exceeds at. And really the only thing that he sucks in is like 3 indoor maps. RPD isn't even that bad, I would be honest. I'll be honest, RPD is not even that bad of a map for Billy. Hawkins and Larry's has to be like bottom 2. And his skill ceiling is still one of the highest in the game. The amount of skill and talent you put into this killer is instantly rewarded tenfold. I do think he has a very high add-on strength. With engravings, you get 20% extra speed for like maybe a 1/10 of a second faster charge time. Well, about like 3/10. And ultimately, this allows you to curve every single loop without needing overdrive. And with overdrive, it's just even better. Ultimately, he is one of the lowest skill floors in the game, which just adds to how great of a killer he is. He is for everybody. And not only is he for everybody, he's fun for the whole 5 players that are playing Dead by Daylight in a single trial. I love getting chased by a Billy. If they do some fun, cool shit, I love that. Ultimately, I think he has a very average add-on versatility. If you go back to that Ots video where he said like 5 of Billy's add-ons, his newer add-ons, are completely useless, that still rings true today. They tried nerfing his base kit to make those add-ons seem better, but you still need a boots, at least. Boots are low pro, and I'm never taking off engravings. So where am I going to fit that third add-on? I do think Billy has a very high perk variability, in which if you run Enduring, he will like, your game will be 10 times better. Not having to respect pallets as a killer who completely shits on pallets is amazing. I will never take Enduring off. I'll never take Lethal off. Getting those satisfying starting chainsaws never gets old. And ultimately, Billy just has the kit to be a great killer in Dead by Daylight. I'm not sure why we ever nerfed him. He had like one add-on that was stupid, and that's it. And I think for the 5th greatest killer in Dead by Daylight, this should come as no surprise, the nurse. She has one of the best snowball potential, if not the best, up there with Twins and Pyramid, like I said earlier in the video. And she also has one of the lowest map reliabilities. She works on pretty much every map that doesn't have a dead zone. And if you don't know, Houndmaster, Pinhead, and Nurse all use the same teleportation coding. So sometimes, you know, you'll run into a dead zone as Pinhead, and then you'll go switch to Nurse. You're going to get that same dead zone. For some reason, this game, the maps in this game are just coded so poorly that we have dead zones for like 1/10 of the killer base, and it's like, yeah, behavior. Ultimately, I think she has a very average skill ceiling. When people say Nurse takes skill, what they mean to say is that Nurse takes muscle memory. I don't really think there's a lot of skill to Nurse besides just knowing how to play her. You're not really doing anything special, I have to say. You just have a lot of playtime on her. You're not doing much. Like, it is simply just knowing the game and knowing how this killer works. There's not much skill involved with Nurse. That being said, I do think she has one of the lowest skill floors. Like I said, you can pick up Nurse, a brand new player who's never touched this game, can pick her up and probably get 4Ks within like an hour or two. Ultimately, I think her add-on strength is high. It's not really amazing, but her add-ons allow for different play styles that sometimes you want to be 115. Sometimes you want to be undetectable. Sometimes you want to teleport back to where you first did your first blink. And ultimately, while her add-ons are strong, I do think they actually have very high versatility. You can run pretty much whatever you want. Personally, I'd never run add-ons on Nurse ever since they removed the Omega Blinks. It's really just muscle memory. And why would you fuck with that muscle memory if you can eventually run out of add-ons? With that being said, I do really only play Nurse for these tier lists. I think I've probably played 2 games in the 9 months since I uploaded the last one, which do not go watch that. I'll probably private it before this video comes out because it's really bad. I have to say, my editing and video creation skills have gotten much better since then. So do not go watch that. And ultimately, I think she has the best perk variability. And to round out the S tier, I have Dracula. He is one of the greatest killers in Dead by Daylight, just overall. His kit is fairly easy to learn. I think he has very high snowball potential and low map reliability. I think what makes him so special is that if you use Hellfire, you probably have Dog up. If you just use Dog, you probably have Hellfire up. Bat form is just the easiest instant catch up. And technically, you're supposed to hear footsteps louder. I do think he has a very average skill ceiling. The most skill ceiling, the highest skill ceiling that you have with Dracula really equates to the highest skill ceiling you have with Spirit, which is knowing how survivors are run, knowing how scratch marks spawn, and being able to track blood. Ultimately, yes, you should run some kind of exhaustion perk on both Spirit and Dracula, just because Iron Will is pretty strong right now and being used a lot. They did recently nerf Medusa's hair, which was his most problematic add-on, as it just gave you free hits after you teleport. But since they nerfed that, I do think he has a very high add-on strength and ultimately a very low skill floor. This killer is not hard to pick up. He's not hard to learn. He has very cool voice lines. He has very cool animations. Ultimately, just everything about him is pretty damn good. I think his pool of add-ons has so much synergy with each other that really you can't go wrong with pretty much anything you want. You have an endgame build. You have a Hellfire build. You have a Dog build. You have a Bat build. You have so many add-ons that do so many different things. It's not just like repeat, oh, this affects your speed. It's not like Oni, where you have 3 add-ons that do the exact same thing, but they're just different colors. You have so many different options to choose from. And ultimately, you can do the same with perks. You don't really need anything besides genetic limits. Like genetic limits, languid touch maybe. I think genetic limits is far more reliable than languid touch. But you have a very high perk variability. Getting into the A+ tier of the greatest killers in Dead by Daylight, just a tad bit below Dracula, I have the Unknown. And I've been such a sucker for the Unknown in the last like couple months. Ultimately, I think he has a very high snowball potential. Getting 2 people weakened while you're picking up and hooking a third just opens up the possibilities that you can get away with. You know, Spies from the Shadows is a very underrated perk on him. Unironically, Unrelenting is probably his best perk if you know how to use it. Shout out Al Ranican. And really, he just has a very low map reliability. I think ultimately the same maps that make Pig so good also make Unknown insane. Having 2 floors with, you know, genetic limits or some kind of exhaustion to track people above you is insane. That is just unparalleled, the mind games that you can do. It's like Pyramid Head, but on a separate floor. Like I said earlier in the video, I do think he has one of the highest skill ceilings. Knowing and understanding how the bounce logic works is incredible. Knowing your distance of how to shoot the UVX is incredible. Even understanding the spawn placement of your teleportation clones is incredible. That's why I love Unrelenting so much, because you can swing to hooks to pallets if you don't want to place a clone there, a hallucination. But ultimately, what I think drags him down is that his add-on strength is not what it used to be. Blurry Photo, while it was mandatory, and what really hurts his versatility in add-ons, I think has partially still become mandatory. The difference right now from old Blurry Photo to today is still 400 milliseconds, which with a killer that you have about 3 seconds at most to react and shoot off is a lot. That's like 10%. That is like 10% of time that it takes to shoot off. If you teleport mid chase, like let's say cow tree, you have a hallucination at the edge by window, you're sitting in pallet, you teleport, get off a shot. You have to be very efficient with this killer, and the nerf to Blurry Photo while making it partially base kit just didn't really do anything. Hey, we kind of changed it, and they nerfed Vanishing Box, which it was needed, but it wasn't really doing anything, because the most of Unknown's add-ons aren't really useful in any way, but they're not useless. They don't really help you, but they're not hurting you. So you're still kind of locked into Blurry Photo, B-movie poster maybe, front newspaper, and like a couple other things. And that's about it. I do think the Unknown has a very average skill floor. Just like with Wesker, it is very easy to pick up, but some things can be confusing. Ultimately, just the bounce logic with the UVX is what hurts his skill floor. But honestly, I think he has one of the highest perk variabilities in the game. Like I said, he unironically uses Unrelenting as well as Singularity does. Spies from the Shadow is actually really good on Unknown. I just stopped using it, of course. And just the builds that you can make with this killer. Like, I have a build using the Punctured Eyeball. Go pause this video and go look at Punctured Eyeball. Tell me how you think you can actually get value out of that. Because I've gotten value out of that 4 times in one game. Like, the variability that he has with his perks is just insane. As the 8th greatest killer in Dead by Daylight, I have the Plague. She has one of the best snowball potentials in the game, and that's really not hard to... You don't really have to question why I'm saying so. Ultimately, I think her average map reliability depends on where her fountains are placed. If you have let's say you have a corrupt fountain just sitting out in the middle of nowhere, you're not really going to get value out of that. If you have a corrupt fountain in the corner of Midwich that you can never get to, you're never going to get value out of your power. I have recently been binging Magi, who has really opened my eyes to how fun Plague can be. And I think he's really dictated how I view her skill ceiling. I always thought she was just a brain dead 115 killer that had everybody injured for most of the game. And then he started doing like these curving orbital shots with her corrupt. And I'm just like, man, that is so cool. And so I have to give her a very high skill ceiling and ultimately a very high skill floor. Learning like how her projectile stream works as a brand new player is a bit interesting. Learning the timings to get a one pump on somebody that isn't moving or like not really strafing A and D side to side to dodge some of your vile purge. Learning where and how to get to your corrupt fountains adds to her skill floor. I do think she has some of the best add-ons in the game, up there with Pinhead. Like she has one of the best add-ons in the game. Every time a generator gets done, she gets, what is it, like 60 seconds of corrupt purge. It's insane. This add-on is so strong, but it doesn't even really need a nerf, to be honest. And with that, I think she has some of the best add-on versatility. You can run pretty much whatever you want. You can be a trap Plague and have your vile purge sit on generators much longer than it normally would, but your vile purge that you throw out at survivors doesn't really affect them. You can just run double apple and have like 3 corrupt purges at the start of the game, never infect people. Because she has such high add-on versatility, I think she also has very high perk variability. You can run pretty much whatever you want on this killer. Her ability to slow people down and just get really easy chases makes her selection of perks just even better. The surprising one I find a lot is enduring. Like, even if you don't have power, you can just swing through pallets. You don't have to respect pallets if you don't have corrupt purge up. And after Plague, we have the Artist. I think she's a very great killer. Her skill floor and ultimately her fun scaling in Dead by Daylight is very hit or miss depending on the player. She has a very high snowball potential. Her ability to down people from afar and really just shut down loops from up close is unrivaled. Like she has such macro control that if you are looking for a killer to just like play like Astra from Valorant, this is your killer. She does have average map reliability because really like elevation is what kills her power. Trying to find that perfect angle in order to send off a bird can be so frustrating. I will say she has a very high skill ceiling. Learning how to get double taps on unsuspecting players is very impressive, I will say. She has a high add-on strength. I think a lot of her really strong add-ons have been nerfed since, but the baby shoe is still really, really strong. You can use that at pretty much any loop. It's kind of like Weave Attunement, but just shorter. I think her high add-on versatility is really what makes her special, because you can run a couple yellow and brown add-ons and still do as well as running double purple or even one of her pink add-ons. She has pretty much everything that you can ask for in her add-ons. It's just they don't synergize as well as you would hope so. I do think as a macro killer, you are quite limited to perks, but ultimately all you really need is Lethal and Iron Maiden if you're being a sweaty bitch. If you didn't know, jumping in a locker completely removes crows, and so anytime somebody jumps in a locker and you have Iron Maiden, they get exposed, their position is revealed, yada yada. After the Artist, I think Singularity is one of the greatest killers in Dead by Daylight, although Like I said before, he has the highest skill floor. He makes up for it in pretty much everything else. He has some of the best snowball potential in the game. His ability to just relentlessly chase survivors and just get away with it is unmatched. Like, even Nurse does not have the ability to just stay on somebody's ass for the entire game. What really kills his rating here in my tier list is that his average map reliability is kind of a problem. I think it's more to do with reusing assets that the game already has, just like Michael Myers' stock transferring to Ghostface, and then Ghostface stock transferring to Singularity. The camera system that Singularity is afforded really is not as good as it should be. I think behavior definitely needs to revamp that system. But he definitely has a very high skill ceiling. There's a lot you can do with this killer. And two, he has a very high add-on strength. Even with the new Soma family photo, it is still one of his best add-ons. Getting that hinder only allows you to get that hit faster. Getting that hinder from Soma family photo only allows you to get that hit faster, which allows you to just keep the cycle up of never-ending chasing. I think he has a very high add-on versatility. Ultimately, there's really only one add-on that I would recommend you not to use, and that is the nearby tear radius. I think if they change that, he doesn't really have any bad add-ons. They just don't synergize as well as they used to before he had his pass-through. And ultimately, this allows him to run any perk that he wants. He has one of the highest perk variabilities in Dead by Daylight, which attunes to his greatness in the game. And to round out the A+ tier, I have the twins. Like I said before, they have the highest snowball potential in the game, and they have a fairly low map reliability. Ultimately, I think the only map that they really struggle on is Elevation, just like Pale Rose or Grim Pantry. Maps that Victor can get stuck on with really bad collision, like Eyrie of Crows, which these are all maps that most killers struggle on, just because of how hard it is to defend majority of gens. But with Victor, he's 150%, I think. So you really don't have any issue patrolling gens, especially when you have two people, which leads me into how high their skill ceiling is. I gave them a 5. I think this killer is very hard to learn, but also very forgiving when you do learn them. You get a lot out of the time that you put into learning the twins, which I do not recommend you to do. And ultimately, that leads to the add-on strength, which I also gave a 5. You can really run anything. I do think Toy Sword is still really good. It's not even a comfort add-on anymore. It's just really strong. Getting a faster charge up on Victor allows you to play the trees that a lot of survivors will like to sit around in order to prevent Victor from latching on or hitting you. And ultimately, they still have a very high skill floor. This is one of the hardest killers to pick up. And with the amount of bugs that they still have, you probably don't want to play them if you're a brand new player. Although the add-ons are strong, I do think they are very average in the versatility. Not a lot of add-ons synergize with each other. Not a lot of add-ons are really good enough to warrant running outside of the main ones that give you the most advantage. And really, you have an average perk variability. I don't think I've seen a single twins player that doesn't run Forced Hesitation and Nurses. Even Corrupt too. Like, every time I see a twins, they have Forced Hesi, Nurses, and Corrupt. So you don't have much in store for your perk variability. To start off the A tier, we have Xenomorph. Honestly, Xenomorph has fallen from grace since they got a couple of changes on release, and since then, really nothing has changed. Only killers have gotten better. And honestly, I think they have an average snowball potential. The map mobility and ease of use with the power certainly helps to down people faster, but you have nothing really special, I suppose. They do have a very low map reliability, though. With the Xenomorph, you have really just... Honestly, the maps that most killers struggle on, you really only get better at, because depending on where the tunnels are placed, you can easily get up to Library on RPD from the outside by the exit gate in like 10 seconds. What other killer can do that besides like Dredge or Demo? Ultimately, I had to give them a best skill ceiling just because of how much talent really goes into the tail whip. Certainly you can use it in like the easiest way possible, but just knowing how and when it arcs is insane. I do think the Xenomorph has a very high to best add-on strength. This might be a hot take, but when you have Lambert's helmet and the map, the two add-ons that basically keep you in your power forever, there's really nothing that can take you out of your power. And that sounds redundant, but like Xenomorph's weakness is being out of power, and ultimately these two add-ons keep you in power forever. If you actually get taken out of crawler mode with these two add-ons equipped, wrap it up, man. Wrap it up. And it might not be a total collection of great add-ons, but it is add-ons that you have to run, which is why I'm giving them an average add-on versatility. You don't necessarily have to run them, but if you want to win games, you probably should. With that being said, they do have a very high skill floor. Like I said, learning the tail whip, it can be easy at times, but learning how to traverse the map and understanding map layouts with the tunnels is very difficult and not something that a brand new player could pick up and learn on their own. And ultimately, that leads me to a very high perk variability. The information that you get off of the tunnels means that you really don't need to run any information perks. You can run just slowdown, you can run chase perks. The tail whip means that you don't really have to care about pallets, so you can run other things. My favorite is Zanchin and No Way Out. I feel like those two combine really well with Xenomorph. If somebody pre-drops a pallet after either you missed a tail whip or they had distance on you, you can see them and go for nice tail whips over the loop. No Way Out, especially combining with their map mobility, certainly means that they are able to run really anything. You have an overall kit that is good to great, but just needs a little bit of number tweaks to push them into the A+ category. Next up, I have Oni, and this might be a hot take, but I think I love Oni, right? Oni is one of my favorite killers in the game, yet his downside is just too much to ignore, especially in the day and age of windows of opportunity being ran in pretty much every single game. Your ability to get your first hit really depends on what the survivors are using, and there's not much outside of Ultimate Weapon, which has been severely nerfed into the ground, and I think is really only useful on Plague. If you want more context, go watch the video. I'll link it up in the corner. Which leads me to Oni having the best snowball potential. I wouldn't say highest necessarily, but it is top 3 for sure. His ability to just traverse the map and down people just as fast as they can get picked up is very, very good in terms of how great Oni is. His high map reliability certainly doesn't help maps like Iria Crows or Badham. Any map that has high density pallets, he can't really outplay because he needs to get his power first. And you can be 3-4 gens down before you even get your first hit sometimes. I think Oni has a very high skill ceiling. Learning how to play your ones really is the difference maker. You can learn how to do flicks, you can learn how to strafe with his power, but just getting good at the game is half of his skill ceiling. Getting your first hit is just so important. and there's so many maps, like I said, in his map reliability, it's kind of hard to get your first hit. Certainly add-ons that will affect getting your power afterwards helps, just like Splintered Hull and the Green Mask. I want to butcher that. But really, his very high add-on strength lends him the ability to make up for his lack of power. The Akito's Crutch gives you 13% extra movement speed, which is not flat haste. It is an entire meter of distance. So think about it. It's 25% haste. It's insane. It's one of his best add-ons, if not his best. It gets you pretty much hits at every loop if you are good enough. With that being said, I think Oni has a high skill floor. He is one of the harder killers to pick up in this game. And then I don't recommend any new player to get him. He does not have any good perks, and they're really only memey and like decent in junk builds, which also lends to his very high add-on versatility. You can pretty much run 15 of the 20 add-ons he is afforded. Both of his iridescent add-ons are meme add-ons. They are not taken seriously, but they still have some place in the game. I think they're just completely outdated and should be updated. But that being said, he does have very repetitive number add-ons, but each of them do their own thing and are basically as good as the highest tier. The Green Mask is really not even noticeable from Splintered Hull. You can run perks that help you get your first hit faster. You can run perks that will help you find more survivors when you have Demon Dash up. You can really run anything that you want. If you want to run Force Slowdown and be a sweaty nerd, you can do that. After Oni, I have the Houndmaster, surprisingly. She has not received any nerfs since I started this video back in December 12th. Ultimately, this is due to behavior's absence during the winter break. And I do think she has a high snowball potential. Being able to down people as fast as she does, and her movement speed, which is really just like uncounterable, lends her the ability to down survivors incredibly fast, like incredibly fast. She also has a average map reliability. I think there are some maps where the chase function can get stuck on sliding off of loops, and the search path definitely has some jank pathing to get to the objective. Ultimately, I do think she has one of the best skill ceilings in Dead by Daylight. Learning how to flick with the dog, it takes an incredible amount of concentration and skill. Learning how to use the search path haste in chase to get a mega lunge, similar to Myers' tier 3 lunge, which gives him an extra 20%. It is very hard to learn, but I think right now with Houndmaster, she is ultimately just a very brain dead killer, and I hope after this video comes out, behavior will do something to fix that. I think the only thing that keeps me from putting her in a very low add-on strength is the fact that most of her add-ons are kind of useless right now. And not useless in the sense of like you can't really get value out of them. Useless in the sense that they're just completely awful numbers, right? These are just thrown together add-ons that you really only have about 4 or 5 that are actually worth running. There's an add-on that adds a flat 2% haste to the search path, which is already 150. I don't know how behavior actually thought somebody was going to use that. Somebody put effort into making that add-on. She has a very low skill floor. As I said, the chase function is just very simple and straightforward, but has a lot of depth to it, similar to Wesker, similar to Billy. learning the search path is a little bit difficult. You definitely have to understand how to play the game first before you can pick up the Houndmaster. Even though her add-ons are very weak in a sense, you can definitely get a lot of versatility out of them. I gave her a very high add-on versatility. Ultimately, you can run a lot of stuff. They're useless, but you can actually combine add-ons now. And she has a very high perk variability. Her ability to down survivors so fast gives you the option to either run a entire chase build, a little mix here and there. You can run gimmick builds even. You can run an entire slug build with Deathbound. That is kind of fucking broken. I hope they nerf that. I ran into that twice, and I haven't played Survivor since. After the Houndmaster, we have the Spirit. Ultimately, I think Spirit is one of those killers that after you have about 500 hours, you should probably buy her. She doesn't have that amazing of perks. I think if you are brand new to the game, Rancor is like the one that you should pick up. It gives you a decent amount of information and kind of guarantees you a kill at the end of the game. Considering that most killers have like some kind of movement ability, you can certainly get your obsession exposed and down. With that being said though, Spirit has a very high snowball potential. Just like I said with Houndmaster, her ability to down survivors super fast is what makes her so potent. But with that being said, you have to use your power for mobility, and as a 110 killer with a 24-meter tear radius, you're really not getting around the map. So you're kind of locked into this thing where you have to run recharge add-ons, which are very strong, don't get me wrong. It's like a base 15% cooldown, and then double recharge green and yellow add-ons, I think, gets it down to like 8.5 or 9 seconds. Effectively having your cooldown in most scenarios. Spirit does have a low map reliability. Ultimately, she can work on almost any map. The more dense palettes wise, I think the more she actually succeeds. Being able to 50-50 pallets and hearing if a survivor leaves to another pallet is incredibly strong. If you get Eerie of Crows loading in a Spirit, you might as well just Alt F4, close the application, whatever. You're never finding a survivor. With that being said, I actually will give her a very high skill ceiling. Learning how scratch marks spawn, learning footsteps, learning audio, as jank as audio is in DBD right now. There is a lot of skill that goes into Spirit. I know the memes of, well, does this killer have a Sennheiser? I like those memes. They're funny, but really Spirit has quite a big skill ceiling. As I said before, her add-ons certainly lend her the ability to increase her snowball potential, and with that, I have to give her a very high add-on strength. Ultimately, she does have some very strong add-ons still, but they're nowhere near as broken as they used to be. Like, we're looking at like 10% power of Spirit when she came out. Mother-Daughter Ring and Prayer Beads were just gross. If you are new to the game and you never experienced that, be grateful. Be very grateful. As high as her skill ceiling is, I do think she has an average skill floor. She is not, like I said, she is not a killer to immediately pick up. You're basically looking at a killer that ultimately just never has every component of the game in their favor all at once. You are basically just hoping that something doesn't go wrong. And you're hoping that survivors don't have light-footed, or they don't have iron will, or they don't have fixated to walk out your genetic limits. You are really locked into certain add-ons and certain perks with Spirit. Like I said, double recharge is what most Spirit mains play. And as I said before, genetic limits to counter iron will is the biggest thing right now. Because genetic limits was just recently changed, it counters exhaustion. Iron Will is an exhaustion perk, and so you really have an average perk variability and a low add-on versatility. After the Spirit, I have the Pyramid Head. I think he has the highest snowball potential up there with Twins, as I said before. His ability to get a 3v1 within the matter of minutes is just unparalleled. You can't really find that anywhere else in Dead by Daylight. And part of what makes him so boring, I really don't like Pyramid Heads. I love playing him. I don't like playing against him because they all play in the same boring ass play style where winning means everything. But that being said, he does have a high map reliability. A lot of elevation will fuck over his ranged attack, and with his skill shot, it lends him a high skill ceiling. Ultimately, this killer is just everything that you're looking for in the most basic sense of DBD. Yes, I do think he has some very boring zoning abilities, but ultimately, what killer doesn't, you know? With that being said, I do think he has an average skill floor. His power does take some time to learn, and it is not something that you can easily pick up. Learning where cages will spawn takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of map knowledge, and he doesn't really have that many add-ons that are as strong as as the ranged add-ons. Getting an extra 2.5 meters of the punishment ability is just, you're not really going to find that anywhere else on any other killer. I believe it goes from 12 to about 15 meters, which is considerable, like very considerable. And with that being said, he has a very high perk variability. I think any killer that can really get value out of Infectious Fright can run pretty much any perk. And after Pyramid Head, I actually have Nemesis. He does have a very average snowball potential. It's more based on luck than actually downing people fast enough. Getting a zombie in the right area at the right time to smack a survivor once or even twice, maybe even 3 times, who knows, really is not a variable you can control. But his Tentacle Whip certainly has gotten much stronger in the last few months. He does have a low map reliability. I think the only thing that really counters him is zombies getting spread out or getting distracted. He does have a very high skill ceiling. Learning how to use his Tentacle Whip takes a lot of time and practice, and ultimately learning how to use the value you get from zombies also takes a lot of time and practice to learn. I do think he has a very average add-on strength. They didn't really buff any of his other add-ons. Certainly Liquor Tongue is finally viable, but now it is like the only thing that you should be using on him. It gives you that follow-up hit after infecting a survivor so much faster. And Marvin's Blood gets you tier 2 faster. Tier 3 is a little bit iffy, but certainly tier 2 to break pallets is so beneficial. That being said, he does have an average add-on versatility, just like his add-on strength. I feel that I don't really run anything else, but you can certainly run an entire zombie build. I do think Nemesis has a very low skill floor. It is just a straight shot out, and it is very easy to control. Zombies are just there to do whatever, and he has a very simple power. With that being said, learning how to strafe with his tentacle is kind of a big deal. I'm sure there's many Nemesis mains out there that have videos to look up. And really, he has a very high perk variability. No longer can you really run Thwack, although they did just change it. Not too long ago, they finally added the aura reading back, which I've already ranted about it before. And that will round out the A tier. Going into the B plus tier, I have Vecna. I do think he has a high snowball potential. His entire kit just allows him to always be chasing and always be doing something. Part of what gives him a very high skill ceiling is learning how to use the instant hitbox on his skeletons, which leads to his high snowball potential. Downing a survivor in like 5 seconds is very, very easy to learn. And ultimately, his very low map reliability lends to his skeletons. Learning map elevation makes it much harder to dodge his skeletons. With his recent buff, they did tone down some of his add-ons, which I actually do think he has an average add-on strength. He really only has the basic attack cooldown and the fly spell cooldown, coming out of fly spell, not the actual cooldown itself. Really, he has a low add-on versatility. That's what I'm getting at. You don't have many options, and the options that you do have significantly nerfed down. He does have a high skill floor. Learning how to roll through all of your spells and be consistently getting value from them is something that a new player will struggle with. And last but not least, he has a very high perk variability. Just like Infectious Fright, I think Rapid Brutality is one of those perks that if you actually can get major value out of them, you can run pretty much whatever you want. Some of my favorites on Vecna is Friends Till the End, Enduring, and Surge. They all lend towards his very hyper-aggressive playstyle and snowball potential. Just slightly lower than Vecna, I have the Huntress. She too has a high snowball potential. Her 110 movement speed and no way to get around the map ultimately lends her a very high map reliability, as well as her snowball potential being lower than what it used to be. She does have the highest skill ceiling in the game. Not only is it aiming, but understanding how elevation works, understanding map hitboxes, even lining up orbitals takes a tremendous amount of skill. And really her biggest fall from grace is her add-on strength, which I gave an average. Back when she still had her infantry belt, which certainly is base kit now, I think she had stronger add-ons, which did lend to being a weaker killer overall, but we're talking about her add-on strength and not her strength as a killer. Really, the only thing you run right now is Glowing Concoction, or like Mangled Hatchet Head, or the yellow cooldown add-on. I forget what it's called. It's like Wood Shaft or something. And she does have a very average skill floor. You don't need to be necessarily good at aiming to play this killer. Jokes aside, the hatchet hitbox is actually fairly accurate. It is just, this game has very bad netcoding, I will be honest. When you're thinking of like some of the worst killers to play against on bad ping, Huntress is easily number one, like by far. Her add-on strength is very average, but she has a very high add-on versatility. Ever since they changed about half of her add-ons, I believe, you can run really whatever you want. You can run a haste build. You can run cooldown build. You can run velocity. You can run wind up, so you never have to really play a palette, to be honest. You can run so many different things that it allows her to also have a high perk variability. You can run an entire aura reading build. You can, again, use like any kind of haste perk. And after Huntress, I have Chag. If you don't know, if you're not up with the lore, this is Chase Hag. It's not regular Hag. I will never play regular Hag. That sounds like torture. With Chag, you run one of her iridescent add-ons that makes her 117.5% movement speed, which I believe is like 4.7, I think, right? 4.7. And then also removes your ability to teleport to traps and hinders survivors when traps are active. With this being considerably faster, she does have a high snowball potential. It's very unexpected, the add-on combinations that you can run with this killer, with this add-on in specific. You know, if you want the trap that you can no longer teleport to be solid, you can do that. If you want the survivor to be deafened, you can do that. You can really run any add-on that she has at her disposal besides, of course, range and like mint rag or something, which ultimately gives her a low map reliability. You are no longer worried about your entire form of transportation being wiped away. Doesn't really matter, you know? You are still 117 at the end of the day, and the traps are only there to remove fast faults. Chag does have an average skill ceiling. Ultimately, this is just like condensed Dead by Daylight. You're also putting in quite a bit of mind power, placing traps, like I said, to remove fast faults. I do think with Chag, you have an average perk variability. I really only use Rapid Brutality and Fury, and then like Corrupt just to set up traps, which you really aren't afforded anything after that. After Chag, I actually do have the Doctor. I think in terms of picking up and learning how to play, this is one of the best killers. It fundamentally teaches you how to use a fairly skillful power. It does have free info. With that being said, Doctor has a very low snowball potential. His power doesn't really afford him the ability to down survivors fast. It does allow him to find survivors incredibly easily, which just adds to his very low map reliability. He can be good on pretty much any map in the game. It doesn't really matter. And he also has a very high skill ceiling. Learning the timings on the shock therapy is incredible. It really only is affected by the ping that you are playing on. And with that being said, he does have a high add-on strength. Ultimately, you know, you have things like detonation delay. You have things like his double Eries, which is just a complete mindfuck for the survivor. He does have one of the lowest skill floors in the game. He, like I said, he is practically the easiest killer to pick up and just start playing out of the box. But with that being said, he does have a low add-on versatility. If you want to get value out of your AoE shock, you kind of do have to run Calm. If you do want to get value out of your shock therapy, you kind of do have to run Detonation Delay still. With that being said, you can run a lot of perks on him, considering I gave him a high perk variability. You can run Impossible Skill Check Doc. You can run the Tear Radius Fuckery Doc. You can do a lot with his power. Next up, rounding out the B+ tier, I have the Demogorgon. It does have a fairly low snowball potential and a very low map reliability. With that being said, the Shred, while it is potent in chase, doesn't exactly have the ability to down survivors fast. It doesn't insta-down. It barely breaks pallets faster, and you kind of need an add-on for that. Since they buffed his portals, he has so much map pressure. He does have a high skill ceiling. Learning how the Shred hitbox works and learning how to hit people around corners is genuinely one of the hardest things to do. I have probably 300, 400 hours on Demogorgon, and I'm still learning how to do that. I do think some of Demogorgon's brown add-ons are still the best to run. Blackheart is just undeniably still insane. Like, getting that extra bit of distance on a survivor, he doesn't really have anything else. And honestly, you're looking at a very low skill floor with the Demogorgon. You have a very straightforward teleportation power. You have a very straightforward, no pun intended, lunge that breaks pallets. that is a good zoning tool. But with that being said, Demogorgon has a low add-on versatility. I still feel like there's about 4 or 5 add-ons that you can actually run. No longer are the teleportation speed add-ons even like viable. They give you next to like milliseconds. You have a very high perk variability. With Demogorgon, you can really run anything that you want. You can run a full chase demo. You can run shaman demo, where you run double portal removal times and then throw the hunt and a bunch of hex perks. You can really do anything you want because this killer has so many different playstyles. Turning off the B tier, I have Wraith. I do think he has a low snowball potential. Outside of playing hit and run, I would give that about a 4, to be honest, instead of a 2, which would drastically affect his rankings. If you are playing hit and run, I would actually put him in between Spirit and Pyramid Head. Hit and run Wraith right now is incredibly strong, but just playing Chase Wraith, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. Wraith is really like the only killer that you can actually get value out of Sloppy Butcher, which is why I gave him a high perk variability. Unlike his snowball potential, I do think he has a low map reliability. He can really work on any map in the game, except like maybe a Blood Lodge that doesn't have a lot of trees or rocks that can hide you, similar to Michael Myers, which we will get to. He is very easy to spot across a map if there isn't much cover. But that being said, he does have a high add-on strength. Windstorm is really just the only thing you should be running. Of course, he has other add-ons, but that extra speed does affect his lunge distance, which does affect his ability to down survivors at loops. He does have a low skill floor. I think the only thing a new player picking up Wraith will have a hard time learning is that extra speed lunge coming out of invisibility. Certainly that is like the only hard thing to learn about him, but it does keep him from a very low skill floor. Wraith does have a high add-on versatility. You can run pretty much whatever you want. You can run 2 brown add-ons that give you disillusion value. Shocker, this perk that really only works on people with less than 1,000 hours, you can get maximum value out of. And with all that being said, I do think, like I said before, if you are playing hit and run Wraith, he is much stronger than I have him right now. Surprisingly, after Wraith, I actually have the Pig. In terms of greatness in Dead by Daylight, you really have about the middle point right here. You have a low snowball potential. Ultimately, the amount of survivor pressure that you get from Pig's power, her secondary power, is very good, but she has no way to actually capitalize on that. So you are still a 115 killer that has occasional stealth that majority of really good survivors will pick up on. Unlike other killers, pallets are a big weakness, so you can't really play this killer without some kind of haste, such as play with your food, and breaking pallets faster, such as brutal strength. Although she has a low snowball potential, I think she has the lowest map reliability, and I'm actually giving her a 7. Any map that most killers would struggle on, like Eyrie of Crows or RPD, she actually excels at. More distance traveled and harder to reach boxes means that it is more likely that you have a survivor not doing gens, or even a survivor dead. I do think she has an average skill ceiling. What isn't placing her skill ceiling lower is the amount of incremental buffs that they are making to her crouch power, which allows you to not only catch up to people faster, but also to use it at much safer pallets that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Ultimately, she has a very high add-on strength, and that is really like the second biggest thing going for her. Both of her iridescent add-ons genuinely make the game so much easier for you, and the amount of solve time or just box related add-ons you have at your disposal allows you to really choose any kind of add-on that you want, giving her a high add-on versatility. I do think she has a somewhat high skill floor. Learning how to track survivors on boxes is what makes her skill floor fairly high. And after the pig, I have the clown, one of the possibly least favorite killers this game has to offer. I will give him a very low snowball potential. He is really just Chag, but slightly different, and I don't know. It is much easier. Chag is kind of like a surprise, and Clown is also a surprise, telling you to stop playing for the day, you know? Although he has a very low snowball potential, because it is much harder to down people, you have to M1 them, and really you only get about 10% haste, unless you have Rapid Brutality, which ups you to about 130 for like 5 seconds. He does also have a very low map reliability. You really aren't affected by much. Certainly survivors that have a wide access to pallets affects most killers, but really Clown in general. The amount of pre-dropping that people will do against a Clown is astronomical. Similar to Pig, I do think she has a low perk variability. You kind of need Brutal Strength. You kind of need Rapid Brutality. I do think he has a very high skill ceiling. As much as I like to joke about how effortless this killer can be at sometimes, learning how his bottle's trajectory is and learning all of the neat little tricks that he has to offer certainly adds to his skill ceiling. I do think he has a high add-on strength. I think it's called the cigar box. Whatever gives you aura reading while you're invigorated is genuinely the only thing that you should be running on this killer, and everything else is kind of just a placeholder. I wish they would kind of make that base kit so you can actually run other add-ons on Clown. In my lethal tier list, I do have him at about bottom C tier, so he kind of does need some buffs. That being said, he does have a low skill floor. He is a very easy killer to pick up. Differentiating bottles between purple and yellow, understanding that one slows down survivors and one speeds both you and survivors up is very straightforward. And the bottles are basically self-explanatory. With that being said, he does have an average add-on versatility. He kind of, like I said, you really only run the invigoration aura reading, and not like he has much else to play with. Just below Clown, I do have Bubba. Bubba is one of those killers that, unless you are already invested in them, I don't think you should really pick up. I do think he will be getting a very major rework in the upcoming months. Simply because of how weak I think that he kind of is. I do place him at an average snowball potential. Unless you are running Iridescent Flesh, which recharges your chainsaw tokens every down, he doesn't really have much going for him in terms of snowball potential. Being able to confirm a kill, it's kind of strong, but ultimately you are losing the game at that point. And he really just has a very low map reliability. Ever since they changed Bubba's collision hitbox, he has just only gotten much easier to pick up and play. No longer are you just praying that the terrible map collision that behavior has created will fuck you over. Ultimately, I do think he has a high skill ceiling. Learning how to moonwalk and getting a feel for how long charges last certainly does lend him some kind of input into how strong he is. And with that being said, he does have a high add-on strength. Recently, I have been running the award-winning barbecue and chili, or the purple add-on, whatever it's called anymore, and Begrime Chains, which put Survivor into the broken status effect for 90 seconds after a hit, it is kind of considerable that, let's say you take like 10 seconds to hook a Survivor after hitting them. They sit on hook for 40 seconds. They come off the hook broken for 40 seconds. So that is a Survivor that can't heal, which ultimately I don't think you should be healing against Bubba. But you are blocking so many different perks that a lot of Survivors like to run right now. I do think he has an average skill floor. He's not exactly the easiest killer to pick up. Learning how, or like learning the distance to not get stunned while you're trying to break a pallet, learning his collision hitbox. I do think Bubba has a low add-on versatility. You are still kind of stuck in running either chili or both chili add-ons. His power just really relies on having longer charges. Last but not least, in the tier list, I have Slinger. How far this killer has fallen, am I right? I think he has a low snowball potential. Really, there's not much going for him in downing Survivors fast enough. He's a 110 killer with a kind of shit range attack that relies heavily on skill, which is why I gave him a highest skill ceiling. He is one of the hardest killers to pick up and master. He does have an average map reliability. I've been talking to quite a bit of Slinger mains, myself kind of included, sort of, a couple years ago, maybe. But the collision on his spear going through tight little cracks has gotten considerably worse. I don't know if this is something intentional that behavior has done. Reference back to Thwack, my Thwack rant. There's many things in this game that behavior just does and doesn't either tell you or says it's a bug, and that it isn't intentional. I do think he has a high add-on strength and high add-on versatility. No longer are you locked into running double reload speed. You can run both of his iridescent add-ons. You can run stun add-ons. You can run break time or chain break time add-ons. You can really run whatever you kind of want on this killer. With that being said, he does have a very high skill floor, being that his entire power is linked to his spear gun. As I said, it is a very difficult power to pick up, and really he has a high perk for high ability. As I said before, any killer that can get massive value out of rapid brutality can really run anything. You can run a terror radius build and surprise people. That was a big thing back in the day before they nerfed his ADS terror radius reduction add-ons. To start off the C tier, I actually have Legion. In terms of greatness, I can't look at this killer at anything more than mid. They have an average snowball potential. Surprisingly, I only gave them a low map reliability just because Survivors tend to space out more as people just get better at this game and understand how to play against Legion. And they do have a low skill ceiling. There's not much to this killer except they do have an average add-on strength. There's not much in their kit as they used to. Really, you just have comfort add-ons and a couple things that lend towards an entire play style rather than just something you can slap on. The number one thing with the Legion is that they have a very low skill floor. This is possibly the easiest killer to pick up and play next to Wraith. There's really, the killer kind of just does everything for you and you run around and point and stab. And that's not a diss to anybody that loves this killer. I'm sure you have fun a lot. You have a lot of fun, I'm sure. With that being said, they do have a high add-on versatility. You can really run multiple builds. My favorite is running the green ruler and the oblivious add-on to find people that are mending in your terror radius. They don't know you're coming, and I like to run it on Larry's a lot. especially with Face the Darkness. Very fun build. I would highly recommend it. But with that being said, you do kind of have a average perk variability. Unlike with Plague, I do think you can actually get some value out of Thanatophobia. That being said, Plague is a much stronger killer with a much stronger power. To the point where having that 20% slowdown to action speeds kind of doesn't mean anything, and you can get more value out of many other perks. Just below Legion in the C tier, I do have the Dredge. I do think the Dredge is actually a fairly lethal killer, but in terms of greatness, I think there is many things that is outside of the killer's control in terms of actually being good. There's not many things you can like actually buff with the Dredge to make them better. It's more just map reliability, which is why I gave them a high map reliability to a very high. Of course, Midwich is Dredge's best map, but outside of that, you don't have much to work with. This killer is just incredibly dependent on maps that just spawning in, you know you might get 5 hooks and maybe not even confirm a kill. I do think Dredge has a high snowball potential. The movement speed and anti-loop affords you the ability to down survivors much quicker than pretty much any other low to mid tier killer on this list. I do think they have an average skill ceiling. With that being said, knowing where lockers are placed and winning 50-50 mind games with the Remnant is kind of the biggest skill ceiling that this killer has. It's not necessarily mechanical input, but more knowing the game input. And I do think the Dredge has very high add-on strength. The one add-on that breaks locks when the exit gates are powered has incredible synergistic abilities with No Way Out, and especially with many other add-ons. Really, every add-on that Dredge has is viable, and some of them are genuinely very strong. I do think one of the biggest things Dredge has going for them is the low skill floor. This is a very easy killer to pick up and learn. Very straightforward, very straightforward teleportation power. Kind of hard to understand anti-loop power. Predator is now incredibly synergistic with Dredge's power. Really, you can use the teleportation ability and it will automatically drop chase, giving you aura reading. You can get a lot of Face the Darkness value in Nightfall. Just below the Dredge, I actually have Ghostface, which in my lethal tier list, he's actually bottom of B tier. But I do think he is particularly not that great. Ghostface is an incredibly outdated killer that doesn't really have any kind of high tier advantage. He's a jack of all trades kind of killer rather than specializing in one thing, which is why I gave him an average snowball potential and an average map reliability. Really, you are just looking for lines of sight and being able to hide yourself behind cover if a survivor is taking you out of your power. With that being said, the high skill ceiling that I awarded him is mainly the ability to understand how his power works and not getting pulled out. I do think Ghostface has an average add-on strength. Really, all you have is like knife leg drop sheath and the instant pain res after exposing a survivor, and anything else is really just comfort add-ons. But you do get quite an average add-on versatility. You aren't really locked into anything. You kind of have a whole lot of decisions to make with that. And I do think Ghostface has a high perk variability. You can really run multiple different builds. His double Eerie add-ons certainly lend to a slug heavy playstyle. He does have Olsen's Wallet, which I did a video on in the past, which allows you to utilize a lot of haste along with drop leg knife sheath. And really, you can run kind of whatever you want. You can run Mindbreaker, which is really good on majority of stealth killers in the game. And the last killer in the C tier, I do have Onryo. I do think with Onryo, she has an average snowball potential, which sort of like with Pyramid Head, you can get somebody out of the game fast, but it is not as reliable as you might think with Pyramid Head. Ultimately, getting and building up Condemn is kind of just relying on the survivor to make mistakes, which is not always going to happen. I do think Onryo has a low map reliability. She can really play on any map, and she definitely gets value out of multi-floor maps such as Midwich or Gideon's. She is still very weak to pallets, although you can basically just negate a stun with her demanifest. I do think she has an average skill ceiling. Ultimately, with understanding how the Bloody Fingernail add-on, which is like the only add-on that you should be running on her, everything else is kind of mid. Understanding how Bloody Fingernail works in chase and understanding how to really track survivors using her entire Condemn system is actually fairly difficult. I do think she has a high add-on strength. Unironically, one of her brown add-ons is probably top 3 in her kit ever since she got a rework last January. It adds 2 meters to the range that Condemn can be applied to survivors within the area of a powered TV, which is radius and not circumference, by the way. So you get basically 4 meters of extra distance per TV, which in some cases you kind of can't escape the Condemn if the Onryo is keeping up on our TVs. Part of Onryo's average skill ceiling, I do think, is her ability to control when she completely goes invisible with spamming demanifest. If you didn't know, it's kind of hard to control, but it is very predictable, where you can essentially just go invisible, kind of like how Old Spirit did. She's very complex and hard to pick up for a new player. With that being said, I do think she has to start off the D tier. I do have Myers. I think he's kind of gone up a few tiers with his recent change. Ultimately, he does feel better to play, but I don't think he has gotten better in any way really at all. Exposing survivors doesn't mean anything if you are still a 115 killer with a slightly bigger lunge. Honestly, we've said this for the last 8 years now, that Myers is a very outdated killer and he needs a complete overhaul, which clearly Behavior has no intention in doing. In all serious regards, I do think Behavior is working on something much bigger for Myers, and they are just giving him some number changes right now. But with all that said, I do think the Shape, or Michael Myers, has an average snowball potential and one of the highest map reliabilities. His ability to down people is kind of nice. They've certainly made it... They certainly changed up how you use his add-ons in order to actually affect that snowball potential. No longer can you kind of get infinite tier 3 at 4 gens, which does suck, but you can run double duration add-ons and effectively have infinite tier 3. I do think Myers has a very low skill ceiling, up there with the Knight. There really isn't much that is hard to understand with this killer. You stalk people and then you can down them very quickly, if not instantly. The one thing going for Myers right now is that he still has one of the highest add-on strengths in the game. I would say probably like top 7 to top 10. Like I said, infinite tier 3 and double duration add-ons are very strong at the moment. Essentially with double duration, your first tier 3 is 50% longer stalking, and then after that it has no downside. So statistically right now you can get about 17 tier 3s just at base, and with double duration that is effectively 15 tier 3s, I believe, and it is double, not even kidding, double the length. So you go from 17 minutes of tier 3 to 30 minutes of tier 3, and it is actually insane. It is quite honestly mind-boggling how they let that go through. It will probably get a nerf soon. I wish I was joking. Michael Myers does have a very low skill floor, similar to his very low skill ceiling. He's not really a hard killer to pick up. He's, like I said, he's very straightforward. He doesn't have that many different techs or different abilities to him. He is just me look at survivor, me stab, you know? With that being said, he does have a very high add-on versatility. You can kind of run whatever you want with this killer. Not saying they're good, but you do have synergy. You do have one of the lowest perk variabilities in the game. You can't really get away with using like rapid brutality, which I don't think you should use, simply because he does have an insta-down. While we're getting into some of the worst killers, I think, in greatness of Dead by Daylight, I do want to give a quick little overview of why I think the Knight is genuinely one of the worst killers this game has ever released, if not the worst. Simply because I really don't know what they were thinking. Let's be real. When the Knight came out, I wasn't playing the game, of course, and then I came back 2 chapters after with the Xenomorph release, and I looked at it and I was like, this is kind of just like a Nemesis rework that fell through, and I assume because the license holders for Resident Evil didn't really want that or something. I don't know. You know, the zombies were supposed to be like a tertiary ability and not your primary, right? But with that being said, the Knight is genuinely the most boring killer to play against, simply because half the game you are being chased by a literal AI. At that point, I'll just go into custom games, or I'll just play the training grounds, whatever it's called. And let's honestly get into it. Knight has a very average snowball potential. Your ability to pressure 2 different survivors at once is his entire power, his entire ability, but it is fairly strong. You can essentially send a guard to go chase another survivor, and you are just 115 man with sword. Which does afford him a low map reliability. You kind of get value anywhere you want. It was just a rush chapter after Wesker came out, which is another thing, is that you are kind of just looking at a repeat right now, because you put a lot of time and effort into a very big licensed chapter, such as Wesker. You know, Wesker's chapter was a lot of effort, came out with 2 survivors, and then after that, you're looking at the effects of what happens when you get a very big IP to the game. And I think you can kind of relate that situation back to Dracula. You know, Dracula was a very big IP for this game. It didn't really bring a lot of players back, but it did get new players. And I think that is the biggest thing that Behavior is looking for, because honestly, I don't think there's much that can bring back old players anymore. If you have fun in this game, you're probably going to continue playing it. And that's about it. You know, with the Houndmaster, I kind of view them the same as the Knight. This is a very buggy killer that came out shortly after one of the game's biggest chapter releases, or licensed chapter releases, and you are seeing the effects of that. There's not much I can really say with this killer. They have a very low skill ceiling, very low skill floor. There's basically negative talent put into this killer. I think the Knight has an average add-on strength, which doesn't say much, to be honest. His add-ons do kind of suck. you kind of are just looking at really like Map of the Realm, the one that makes the Carnifex cooldown shorter, which is you're breaking pallets. It's like a Giga brutal strength in a sense. And to round out the knight, he does have an average perk variability. You kind of can run whatever you want. Certainly you can play a campy playstyle much more than any other killer can, which I think just adds to the boring factor of the knight. Simply just for existing, I think this killer is just not fun whatsoever. Slightly lower than the knight, I do have Chucky, and this is based on Chucky's complete destruction, I would call it, of their power, nerfing their movement speed by an entire 20%, 20% overall, and 50% haste, if you want numbers that way. This new version of Chucky is just so awful. I don't know what they were thinking. But getting into Chucky, I think they have a very low snowball potential, which is just not necessarily afforded, but really awarded by just how dog shit the power has become. Moving at 8 meters a second, it is really not much anymore. The thing with Chucky is that they have a low map reliability. You can kind of just play whatever you want, and only the amount of pallets and windows kind of just adds to the skill ceiling. Which right now I think the entire skill ceiling is tied to your ability to scamper and do all the techs that Chucky has. You're kind of just relying on the game being shitty, to be honest, which is not a good feeling for either player on either end. Really, you're looking at, like, ultimately just a weak killer that relies on techs. I do think Chucky has an average skill ceiling and a high add-on strength. You still have portable TV, you still have jump rope, you still have hard hat, which I've been loving hard hat. I think it's honestly might be Chucky's best add-on. And you still have your cooldown add-ons, which are considerably much more important right now because they nerfed the cooldown again from 12 to 14 seconds. And really, you have a low skill floor. This killer just accentuates like the whole me press button, me go fast, me hit you, but also in third person. And so this isn't a hard killer to pick up. I think the hardest thing about this killer for a new player is kind of just the learning how to use the third person correctly. And I do think Chucky has a low add-on versatility and a low perk variability. There's not much you can really run nowadays just because of how dog shit the killer is. With that being said, really you are kind of just hampered. Just under Chucky, I do have Trickster. I think I'm patiently waiting for Trickster to get a complete overhaul because it is frankly just an outdated power right now. There's not much to this killer that is necessarily interesting or fun. If you are looking for a ranged killer that takes skill, you can play Huntress. If you are looking for a like an ADHD brain soother, you can kind of just play Legion. That it's really, this killer needs an entire rework and not just some number changes. The idea of like a slow poison trickle is kind of just lost on me in Dead by Daylight. I don't think it thematically fits. I don't think it balance-wise fits. And honestly, if you didn't know, if you're new around here, Trickster is the entire reason why I quit Dead by Daylight in the first place. I was playing on PS4 basically since when the game came to PS4. I was playing from when the game came out on PlayStation up until Trickster's release, uh, between PS4 and PC. And really, I think he came out in such a boring state that I genuinely took like 2 years off of this game. Like, his design coming out was just so uninteresting. Like, he was so uninteresting that it's kind of hard for me to even really care about this killer. Which is why I do think he has a high snowball potential, simply for just the ability to camp in hard tunnel survivors. And he has a very high map reliability. The collision on the knives has gotten considerably worse, which I think is just an overall map issue, more than this killer being specifically changed. And he does actually have a high skill ceiling. Unironically, I do think Trickster is a fairly hard killer to play. But just because a dog shit killer is hard to play doesn't mean that they're actually good. I do think he has a very high skill floor. This is not a killer that you should be picking up or trying unless you are really interested in the character model, which I actually do like the character design. I will say Trickster's character design is very interesting. Apart from that, nothing else is really interesting. He does have some very cool skins. He does have a very high add-on versatility. Although they aren't strong, you can run multiple builds. There's an entire haste build revolving around his iridescent add-on that gives you stackable haste per laceration meter or per consecutive knives hit, using the dance shoe add-ons, which is stackable with perk haste and also the iridescent add-on. Ultimately, you can run different builds, but they aren't strong. You can run a Forced Hesitation Infectious Fright with your ultimate, which is decent, I guess. He has 2 add-ons that actually recharge his ultimate depending on how fast you are hitting knives, which is fairly decent, but is incredibly situational. Getting into the F tier, I have Freddy as the 3rd worst killer in the game. And ultimately, in my lethality tier list, he is actually just a step below, but I think he has, in terms of ease of use and picking up the killer, and ultimately just his add-ons and his add-on versatility, I think he is slightly better than Trapper. He has a very low snowball potential. You are just a 115 killer that can sometimes get free hits, and then has like one of the worst anti-loot powers in the game. Easily the worst teleportation add-on in the game. He essentially has no map control for 59 seconds at intervals. With that being said, he does have a low map reliability and a low skill ceiling. This is not a hard killer. The highest skill ceiling that Freddy has is learning to place blood puddles through windows and pallets. That's really about all he has. Or 99ing teleports to force people off. Like, that's really about it. He does have an average add-on strength. I do think Paintbrush should just be base kit. Because, like, the clocks are ridiculously stupid counterplay. And I feel like there should be another way, just base kit, that you can counters Freddy's power. The problem is that the sleep timer is such a ridiculously long and drawn out thing that, like, you're a 115 killer with no movement speed. So really, you can't use your blood puddles to get your first hit to get them into the dream world. You can't use your teleportation ability to get people into the dream world, which again, I'm not really sure why we didn't just have blood puddles be not only a slowdown but also a teleportation thing. He does have a low perk variability, just being one of the worst killers in the game. You kind of don't have a choice in what you can use. And for the 2nd worst killer in Dead by Daylight, I do have the Trapper. Originally, Trapper was made as a way to completely counter infinites. And he's gotten so many quality of life updates since then. The Trapper is a completely outdated power that needs an entire overhaul. Just fundamentally, I think there's so much that behavior could do with this killer that they could have done in the last 8.5 years and that they haven't done. Whether it be out of negligence or intentional, we may never know. But really, like, behavior's just inability to actually change the mascot, the literal mascot of this game, is kind of concerning. I do actually give him a average snowball potential. He kind of gets his entire snowball potential from his power. Shocker, I know. But getting a survivor in a trap, especially if you have Honing Stone, which is part of why he has a very high add-on strength. Honing Stone is genuinely one of the best add-ons for him, and I think if you make that base kit, I think he will actually be a very stronger killer. That being said, the abundance of Unbreakable, Work and Live Forever, really just anti-slugging perks, would kind of balance this out. I mean, you just buffed Work and Live Forever. Why not just make Honing Stone base kit and change it into something else? But I do think Trapper has the highest map reliability, which is what makes him really one of the worst killers. It's not that Trapper's power is so easily counterable, is that it's so easily countered by information. Trapper is more about information weakness than actual mechanical weakness. You can completely shut down Windows, but as long as another survivor knows about it, you can't really do anything about it. I do think he actually has an average skill ceiling. It's more about, like I said, it's more about knowledge with Trapper than anything actually mechanical. This killer gets considerably better the more playtime that you have. You are also playing better survivors, but ultimately, your knowledge as killer, understanding the map layout, understanding what palettes and windows are incredibly strong, understanding what really just mind games, essentially, what makes his skill ceiling so average. I do think he actually has a high skill floor. As a new player picking him up, you might not understand what is a good trap to place and what isn't. Certainly it is kind of harder to differentiate whether that Z wall is good to trap or whether or not that God palette at main building is good to trap. I do think he actually has a very high add-on versatility. You can kind of run 16 to 17 of his 20 add-ons and actually make a build around them. Doesn't mean that they're exactly good. All of them are good, but you can certainly run different builds. He does have a very low perk variability. You kind of need corrupt intervention. You kind of need a lot of slowdown just simply for paying off for the amount of setup that you put into this killer, which I think it is why he is so bad, is that the setup that you put in is so easily diminished by the survivors just pressing a button for like 4 seconds. That is, the payoff is not worth the setup. And so really you are just kind of man with weapon for like majority of the game. You are kind of just banking on the fact that survivors will make mistakes, which again is not consistent in a game like Dead by Daylight. And by far the worst killer in Dead by Daylight should come as no surprise. I have the Skull Merchant. I honestly have given her a complete 0 in snowball potential. You look at other killers that have a 1, similar to Freddy. His power actually works. You can actually get value out of Freddy's power. With Skull Merchant, what value is there to be had? You get shitty information. It takes forever to actually injure people. No longer can you stack haste and actually play this killer. It is kind of just shitty info, and her undetectable barely even works when you're setting a drone, which thematically doesn't make sense. Why do you get haste for putting down a drone? With that being said, she does have an average map reliability. You can kind of set up drones in a certain way, and you kind of can get value out of your undetectable. She does have a fairly high skill ceiling. Whatever kind of input you can actually make with this killer is fairly difficult. Learning how to control the beams on a whim, especially at a tile, is a fairly big skill ceiling. That being said, she does have a low add-on strength. I think the number one add-on that you would probably be using, I couldn't even tell you. I'm gonna be honest, I really couldn't even tell you. I don't play this killer. Really, this killer just do not get. Thank you for watching this video. As I'm recording this voiceover, we did hit 100 subscribers. So if you made it this far, I love you. Thank you. And I do kind of want to do a Q&A. I might mention this in another video as well. But if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask them.